Welcome everyone. For today I took a look at the defense reduction and vulnerability debuffs to boost our damage. For this I collected some damage numbers from Drake Chasm, Nightmare difficulties and Abyss 1, for two different attack values from Esme and Estrid. To ensure the numbers were unmodified by critical damage, I only used non-crit values. I also calculated 100% damage modifiers back to 100% for Estrid's attacks. Since Esme is unskilled on my account, I didn't have to adjust her damage values. This calculation was important for easier comparison for the damage values from the two different heroes, especially for the damage gained from defense reduction. The damage numbers I collected were first unmodified by the tested debuffs, afterwards modified by defense reduction or physical vulnerability, and at last modified by both. I then compared the results and drew conclusions about the overall performance of both debuffs. Additionally, at the end, I briefly discussed the damage formula and why it might be too inaccurate or outdated. This conclusion is a result of the damage numbers obtained during the test, compared with the damage gained from defense reduction. The first and easiest conclusion is how vulnerability works in this game. As a debuffer in my test, I used Mary. In each of my tests, the final damage number was increased by the percentage given in the vulnerability description under her skills as shown in this table. This means, in Mary's case, the unmodified damage my heroes dealt was increased by 20% after I applied vulnerability. This was also true when I compared the damage numbers after both defense reduction and physical vulnerability were applied. So the first conclusion is vulnerability is a modifier that is applied after the end of the damage calculation and increases the damage dealt by the percentage value given in the spell description of the debuff. Now I like to talk about the trends I observed during my testing. In these two graphs for Esme with 11,300 attack and Estrid with 7,100 attack, we see the damage gain from the two tested debuffs on the y-axis, as well as the damage gains when both debuffs were applied. On the x-axis, the Dragon Chasm stages are given from where the damage gains are taken, with 5 used for Abyss 1. First, I like to look at the orange dots. These represent the damage gain from the physical vulnerability debuff. We can see that for both heroes, the effectiveness decreases in higher stages for Drake Chasm. This is clearly a result of the target's increasing defense during each higher stage. This means our hero deals less damage, and accordingly the 20% from the vulnerability debuff on top of the damage dealt is less. On the other hand, with increasing difficulty, we see an effectiveness increase of the defense reduction debuff, here represented by the blue dots, except for one case. The increasing effectiveness is explained by the increasing defense of the target through Nightmare 1 to Abyss 1. Accordingly, a 30% defense reduction allows us to apply a larger portion of our hero's attack value to the final damage calculation. The outliner from Esme I explain by noting her attack value of 11,300 might be just too low and is still too low to overcome the target's defense, even with the defense reduction applied in Abyss 1. If it's true that the target's defense is subtracted from the attack in the damage calculation, the defense in Abyss 1 must be around 15,500. Which I highly doubt, unless the 30% defense reduction isn't actually a 30% defense reduction, but more on that later. When we cross-compare the two tested attack values, we see that with increasing attack, the vulnerability debuff becomes stronger. At the same time, we see that the damage gained from defense reduction stays the same for each Dragon Chasm stage, which is because a 30% defense reduction is the same value in each stage. In the Nightmare stages 1 through 4, I achieved the exact same damage gains from defense reduction. However, in Abyss 1 for Estrid's attack value of 17,100, I achieved a damage gain of 2,701, while for Esme with 11,300, only a damage gain of 75. This means that Esme's attack value of 11,300, even with 30% defense reduction, is still not enough to break even with the defense value in this encounter. Because with a higher attack value, the vulnerability debuff becomes stronger, and with a lower attack value, the defense reduction debuff becomes stronger, it's difficult to conclude if defense reduction or vulnerability is the stronger debuff. For people who are in the range of Drake Chasm 3 to 4, it's likely that both debuffs modify our damage by around the same value, unless you don't use heroes with extreme high base attack values, like Gigiri, which you need to handle Abyss 1. For Abyss 1, it's difficult to say, for me, which debuff is stronger. Even the data suggests that defense reduction is clearly stronger, because I don't have heroes like Gigiri with these extreme high base attack values over 6000 yet, to test if they are scale better with vulnerability. But overall, it seems that defense reduction is the better debuff for most heroes if you have to decide between one of them in Abyss 1. At least for Astrid, who has a base attack value comparable to most legendary heroes, I think the benchmark used here is a good start to say that in most cases, the damage gain from defense reduction is larger than from vulnerability in Abyss 1. As soon as I got my hands on one of these heroes with extremely high base attack, I will do the test to see which of both debuffs is stronger for them. Before I talk about the damage formula and why it's likely inaccurate, I like to summarize the section about the debuffs, defense reduction and vulnerability. Defense reduction gives every hero the same damage gain at the same difficulty, because it reduces the defense. This also applies to magic resistance, because it is the equivalent of defense reduction, but for magic attacks. Defense reduction becomes stronger with lower attack values of heroes, because it allows us to apply a larger part of a hero's attack to the final damage output. Also, it becomes stronger with higher difficulties because of the increasing defense. Vulnerability becomes stronger with higher attack values of a hero. Since it's a given percentage increase at the end of the damage calculation, and can, therefore, scale higher than the fixed damage increase value from defense reduction. But because a larger attack value is neglected by the target's defense with increasing difficulty, vulnerability becomes less and less effective with higher difficulties. Now let's talk about the damage formula, where the defense is subtracted from the attack in the first step. Because I use damage values unmodified by critical damage, I should get the same defense value for each of my both tested heroes when I subtract the damage dealt from a hero's attack, at least for lower difficulties. Well, this is not the case, as you can see here. Also, on the other hand, I got the exact same damage gains from defense reduction. Assuming that attack minus defense results in a damage gain, I should get the defense values of the bosses at each difficulty by dividing the damage gain by the defense reduction. These so calculated defense values are also completely different from the attack minus defense calculation. Accordingly, there is something very odd with the official available damage formula. If I missed something, please write in the comments. Otherwise, it's time to figure out what is really behind the damage formula. With this, I hopefully covered the most important parts of each topic, and that it gives you a better understanding of when to use one of these debuffs if you can't use both. If this video was helpful for you, like and subscribe for upcoming content, and most of all, have a nice day.